Hi class, we're continuing our presentation from last week and entering the late Gothic period. So late Gothic and early Renaissance, they kind of blend together. A lot of historians, they argue when exactly each started and ended. Last week I had showed you a couple paintings by Giotto, and we're going to continue from there. So here we see Giotto's painting here, the Lamentation over the Dead Christ, and it kind of straddles the late Gothic and the start of the early Renaissance. A lot of historians credit this painting, or Giotto's paintings in general, his merging of the Byzantine art styles and Northern Gothic that merge together creates this new series of paintings, this early Renaissance. So we talk about the Renaissance in the next week's presentation. We're starting with the early Renaissance here. Now the early Renaissance here, we're going to touch base on not Italian Renaissance, Florence, places like that. We're talking about Northern Renaissance, early Renaissance, Netherlands painting. So when we talk about the Flanders style, Flanders is a part of Belgium. It's the northern part of Belgium, and we see that on the map here, which is part of the Netherlands as a whole. So here we see the whole map of the Netherlands. We see upwards of Belgium, the upper part of Belgium, all the way bordering onto Germany. All right, so here we're looking at work done by an artist that we're not really even sure of his name. He is just called Master of Flamel, after fragments of an altarpiece were found in the town of Flamel. But after much research, historians tend to think he's actually the artist Robert Campin. And here we are, we're looking at his finest work here, the Merode altarpiece, which nowadays is called the Annunciation Triptych. So every detail in this painting is there to tell a truth, meaning every detail is accounted for, and it's supposed to be an exact depiction of space and relationships, although this definitely falls short. There's a flattening here between the figures in the background. In the center, we see that table, and the table looks like we're looking downward at it. But we're not. We're also seeing the side of the table. So there's not a correct perspective here. In the next presentation, when we talk about the Renaissance, we're going to see how they created linear perspective and how things recede perfectly in the background. Here we're starting to get that, but it's falling short. In the last presentation, I had shown you manuscript paintings, illuminated manuscripts, and they're definitely flattened, right? The figures look a little flattened to the background. So here it's kind of a little reminiscent of that. So Robert Campin painted for well-to-do patrons, fellow citizens, all right? This is a time of wealth. People are wanting to show off their wealth a little bit. So they're commissioning artists to paint these altarpieces for their own homes, which was never done before. Most altarpieces were done for big churches, and they were large and elaborate. It is elaborate, but it's on the much smaller side. I think it's like 3.5 feet long. So donors would commission these paintings for their own homes, and they would be displayed. So they would be closed during the week, then they would open them on the weekends or on special occasions for people to view. In the left of this panel, we see the person who bought the painting, this man kneeling, and his wife behind them kneeling. That's typical in a lot of commissioned works. You'd have a picture of the person who bought it in it, most of the time kneeling, because they're buying this to pay homage to God, to put themselves in a better light in God's eyes. They're purchasing this, kind of saying that they pray all the time and that they want to go to heaven in their afterlife. Now, this painting tells the story of the Annunciation. Now, the Annunciation, if you don't know, is when the angel Gabriel announces to the Virgin Mary that she's going to conceive a son by the Holy Spirit. And that happens in the middle of the panel here. On the right, we see a man, that's Joseph, and we can tell that it's Joseph because he's a carpenter there. And this painting was one of the first to show these like supernatural events, like the angel coming to visit the Virgin Mary, shown not in these idyllic settings, but in everyday contemporary environments. So this is part of a room in everyday life during this time, not in this idyllic setting that this would normally be painted in. This is the start of a new series of works that are going to be painted in, at the time, that current setting. So you're going to see towns that are in the background, things like that, cities in the background. Here we do see that if you look through the windows. Now, each detail in this painting holds a very specific symbolic ideal. It's called disguised symbolism. So every little detail has symbolism here. There's flowers that are associated with the Virgin. Roses tell of her charity. The violets that we see in here, of her humility. The lilies in the center there are her chastity. If you do research on this painting, you're going to see every little minute detail has some symbolism. I'm just going through a few. In the back, we have this beautifully shiny gold basin. And that basin of water symbolizes the Virgin Mary as a clean vessel. We also see a candle on the table. Now, the candle was just blown out, it looks like. You see some smoke rising. And a lot of people question why there would be a lit candle in daylight. But in the painting here, that can represent that divine light, the divine light of God that was extinguished right before the archangel came. It's kind of showing that God is becoming man. So the most famous of all of the Netherlands painters is Jan van Eyck. He is known for about 24 very famous paintings and religious works and portraits. He had a supreme skill in oil painting, and unfortunately little is known about his early life. In about, I think, 1422, he was working for the Count of Holland. 3 years later, he became court painter to Philip the Good, the Duke of Burgundy in Bruges. So with his role there, he remained in the Duke's service for the rest of his life, and he even went on several diplomatic missions for him. So this is one of his earliest paintings. This is the Ghent altarpiece. Now, this bears an inscription suggesting that this is a stupendous painting. And it really is. So I'm going to have a link to a video I want you to watch. So please watch that and answer any questions. It's going to go into details about this altarpiece. Here we see man in a red turban. This could be a self-portrait of Van Eyck, but it's never been proven. This painting marked a significant revival of portraiture. Now, this genre had since gone away since the age of antiquity, pretty much, so a long time. This is a completely secular portrait. There's no religious undertones in it. Now, this is like a private portrait being commissioned. And these became very popular. As human beings confronted themselves, they wanted painted portraits, kind of like a selfie today. They objectified themselves as people, individuals, not as the collective good that was before that. So as the Middle Ages faded away, in this photo you see how things have changed. The person there is looking directly at the viewer, or at himself in the mirror, if he's painting the picture himself anyway. So far as studies show, this is the first Western painted portrait in 1,000 years to have somebody looking directly at the viewer. This composed gaze and this three-quarter head and shoulder pose impressed many people. Van Eyck created an illusion that from whatever angle the viewer looks at the face, the eyes return to that gaze. So in this photo, if we're able to look and zoom in on it, you can see that there's bloodshot effects in the eyes. Now, by his beard, there's actually stubble going on, and you can see weathered skin. So the attention to detail is so great. Here's the Arnolfini portrait. Now I'm going to have another video link for this as well, because there's so many details in this and so much symbolism to go through that this video can do a better job than me, because it can zoom in and show you specific details. There's a lot of questions about this painting. It's a very interesting piece, so please watch the video. Here we have Hieronymus Bock's painting, The Garden of Earthly Delights. It's a triptych, and it's probably the most fascinating and puzzling paintings you're ever going to see. Let's start with the left panel here. We have God presenting Eve to Adam in this beautiful idyllic landscape. But he complicates this by having really imaginative things in here. We have this like odd pink fountain structure in a body of water. We have very unusual hybrid animals. Then let's go to the right panel here. We have what looks like the horrors of hell, pretty much. This darkness. We have beastly creatures devouring people. We have other people here impaled. We have even a gambler nailed to his own table. There's a spidery monster embracing a girl. There's just too much to see here if you look in. And in the next few slides, you're going to see close-ups of some of this. So sandwiched between Paradise, Garden of Eden, and Hell on the right is a huge central panel. Now, there's a lot of nude people. There's landscape. There's other bizarre creatures. Unidentifiable objects, pretty much. Like, I don't even know what they are. There's fruit, there's birds. So this scene suggests, I guess, procreation. It's a very sexual scene. So, this is definitely discussing the sins of the flesh. It has some religious undertones. So please, on the next few slides, we're going to talk about even more specifics. So here's that close-up view of God and Adam and Eve here. Now, on the upper part of it, we can start seeing the detail of that pink fountain-like structure. It's very hard to understand what it is. Here we have part of the central panel. We have a close-up. We have bathers naked in the water, cleaning themselves. We have people naked riding horses. There's an array of animals. Yet another close-up here. We have more nude figures holding fruit. We have strawberries. We have like a plum-like object on someone's head. We have an owl, a large owl. Here's a close-up of the side of hell here. So we could kind of look and we can see body parts. We see knives. We see people contorted. Again, this story of Adam and Eve. We have forbidden fruit here, right? We have large fruit. We have people eating the large berry. We have somebody actually coming out of something. So the work by these Flemish masters that we just looked at was going to influence many people everywhere. And we're going to see that by works by Swiss artists, German artists, French artists, and eventually Spain and beyond. Here we have Conrad Witz, his altarpiece. This is a close-up of a part of the altarpiece anyway. This is in the Geneva Cathedral. Now we can see here that it's definitely reminiscent of some of that Flemish stylized work. We see realism here, and we see specific details of shading and optical appearances that were started in the Netherlands. We see that water right in that foreground. We can see right through it. And then in the background, it's more opaque. Reflections are starting to be seen now in these paintings. The realism of the fabrics. You can see the shading, how detailed it is. Here we have Jean Fouquet. He was the leading painter in France at the time. Here's another example of a commissioned piece for a private patron. So here we have the donor himself, the person who commissioned the piece to be made, kneeling. And next to him is a saint, Saint Stephen. So here we have the Madonna and Child, but it's also a portrait. This is Agnes Sorel, Charles VII's mistress. Well, they think it's his mistress. Now in this picture here, this painting, we see an idealized image of this beautiful woman. She's wearing a crown and a robe. There's a choir of angels around her. So here we see the beginnings of an intellectual abstraction here. We're going to see that in French art later on. Look how the skin looks. Everything looks a little bit more fake, right? Looks like plastic here. So the emphasis here is the treatment of the background. And it's very different from anything else we've seen, right? It's two colors here, red and blue, these angels behind her. Here we have Michael Pocker's St. Wolfgang altar. I have a video for you to watch on this as well, so you can see it in the space. It's kind of like you're there. The photos just don't do it justice, so the video is a little bit better. I would love you to watch it. This is a huge, huge altarpiece. It's almost floor to ceiling, and it opens up different times of the week. It's closed, partly closed, and then fully opened. Here we see the life of Jesus through sculpture, through painting, through relief. It's very impressive. Here we have two inner wing pairs of paintings that are movable, that open up. It's scenes from the life of Christ. We have the baptism, we have the temptation, we have the wedding at Cana, we have feeding of the 5,000, we have the attempted stoning, and moneylenders driven from the temple. Then we have Christ and the adulteresses and the raising of Lazarus. So we're going to end our presentation with Rogier van der Weyden. Now he produced this masterpiece, Descent from the Cross, in 1435. He did this in his mid-30s. And you could tell here that he has influences from Van Eyck, from the Master of Flamel. You could just see the richness, the glowing colors, the folds of the drapery, how precise they are, the angles of them. So here, when we look closely at it, we can see grief-stricken gestures, right? We can see such emotion in here. There's also a very shallow architectural niche. So from the foreground here to the background, right, there's hardly anything. The figures are on top of each other, and there's nothing in the background. It's solid. So this shallowness to the foreground to the background is giving the viewer an advantage. It's showing the tragic event. It's not showing you any other stories but what is going on. Your eye just focuses on the key figures that he wants to show you. You're not distracted with any backgrounds, any other detailing.